Hi, good morning. Karen Lovely here, and we are going to be discussing specific questions from you, the listeners. And today I have an amazing human being with me on the line, and he has his question, and I'm going to address it. So this is a more of a question and answer type podcast where it is impromptu and unscripted, and a question that I had no idea was going to be presented, and I'd like to discuss it because this is so important to be able to handle specific issues, concerns that the listener has in regards to my podcast, The Power of Self-Evolution. That said, good morning, Kris. How are you?
Good morning, Karen. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine, thank you. And we're going to give this a whirl and see how it goes, because I know this is a little new for you. You've never done this before. Is that correct?
I have done a podcast before, yeah.
Okay, but in terms of question and answer, of asking the questions. Yes.
I'm sorry, you cut out.
Oh, I said in terms of asking questions.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so I didn't even know that. All right, great. So what is your question specifically?
So specifically, my question is around money and around your story. Basically, when you didn't have a whole lot of money, and then making that transition to now making money and being profitable. My question is around how you dealt with not having any money. How you reframed your perceptions to be okay with that and sit with that, and to know that, in the future things will be better.
Okay, great question. So there's a couple moving parts there. So if I can think back in my own life, and yes, so I came from money. I love money, meaning I was raised with money and a lot of privileges. And then I've been able to do extremely well in the realm of making money. But what happened was my greatest fear happened is my sister killing herself through slow suicide. And that just about killed me. And during that time, in my darkest depression and hopelessness, the money that I had disappeared. And more importantly, what disappeared, my will to live disappeared. And therefore, in retrospect, I was really thinking at some level, I want to die, so I don't really need money. But on the surface, I didn't really care anymore. And I had lost my interest in real estate. I was actually very successful in investment real estate. I still hold my California real estate license. But I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't care, and it lost its mojo and its meaning for me, and the passion died. But that was a direct correlation to my beingness and my heart dying, and my will to live being dead for so long. I didn't want to live anymore. So wanting to survive, breathe, and have a pulse was definitely dying. And so there was a direct correlation to money, and to not just money, to good, magical, miraculous things happening. I was a magnet for disaster. I was a magnet for unhappiness. I was a magnet for getting into business and partnering with the wrong people, crooks, people that stole from me. And I call that part currency. So I do believe that everything outside of ourselves is a physical manifestation of the spirit, of spiritualness. And that includes everything material, houses, real estate, cars, relationships, clothing. Everything outside of ourselves is a physical manifestation of what is happening and not happening in our relationship to ourself and our spirit, our soul and our spirit. And so my spirit's dying, so of course everything outside of me was dying. And I got to the point where I had absolutely no money and almost lost everything. However, the thing I never gave up on was training and going to seminars and talking to like-minded, like-souled, like-hearted human beings. That's what saved me, was putting myself in a community of people who understand me to some degree and are working on the same things and seeking the same answers about life and reaching our highest, best human potential. So what I did was, well, it came to the point where I had no choice, and a friend saw me dying before his eyes. He actually paid, he offered to pay for my group coaching and seminars. And so that's really interesting. Even in my darkest hour, I magnetized support. And that was because I magnetized that support because I was still giving back. I was still outside of myself in terms of my devotion to philanthropy, to being of service, to being contribution. And it just hit me right now, Kris, thanks to this brilliant question, is that this is the magic that I speak of, is at some level, we are in a great zone, but we don't recognize it as being in a good zone even, or a half decent zone. But I knew that I had to do this last charity event. I produced it, I hosted it, and I said, after this, I'm done. I'm out. I am dead. And so that I knew, but I didn't give up on being a contribution. And I remember hosting an event on $0 for the U.S. Marines Toys for Tots, my December charity event. So because I was giving back selflessly with nothing, I mean, I was so empty and so dark and so deeply depressed, but I knew I had to stay connected to doing this. And in that, it was a friend who attended the event that I don't even see that often, that then wanted to contribute back to me without me even knowing. So I magnetized this opportunity out of the blue when I didn't even care. And I was at my end. And so I bring that up to say that no matter what, I believe that we go through our darkness, and the ones who keep seeking and keep training and keep learning and are relentless about that are the ones that have some cognition and connection to their highest, best truth, their purest self. Does that make sense to you, Kris?
Yes.
Yes. You want to keep your eye on that prize, okay? And that's how I was able to get through it, is being reminded of that genius within me. So I'm reminding you to stay connected to that cognition, that recognition, that consciousness, the awareness that you at some level know without a shadow of a doubt that there's something very unique, special, different, profound about you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
I think one thing that's really stuck with me is you said you magnetize support.
Yes.
And in a previous conversation we had, you mentioned that it doesn't matter where the money comes from, so long that what you need gets paid for.
Mm-hmm.
And that was big for me, because here I am thinking that I have to pay for everything, I have to do everything myself to some degree, and I lose sight of the fact that money can come from other places other than just myself.
Exactly right. So this friend of mine who offered to pay for me, and I graciously accepted, except I had no idea what he was even paying for. I remember that clear as day because I didn't focus on the money. So we're talking about money. Believe it or not, we're talking about money. But we have to have no expectations or attachments to and with money. And that's when the money really shows up. I could care less. As a matter of fact, I was out. We were done. I was done. Now, this has been many times that I want to kill myself, but this time I knew how I was going to do it and when it was going to happen. That's when it gets serious, okay? And that's when hashtag the struggle's real. So there it is. And yet I ended up magnetizing a friend, but here's the thing. This was a long-term friend of mine who knew me and saw me and my life and knew through objective reality what I was capable of. This friend was one of my first students in my first dance fitness class in Los Angeles from Southern California, from Orange County. When I moved up to pursue my dance career, I get a job in a gym teaching a dance fitness class, and there were only like 3 people in that class. And it was a small independent boutique gym. And he and another friend of ours was in that class. And we had been friends. And he saw me rise from this struggling dancer and dance teacher to my ranch. And so he had reference points to know what I was capable of. So the charity event was hosted on my ranch. And because of that also, he knew people can see us even though we think they can't. They can see us for the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm. And so he knew his investment was sound at some level. But it was more of his heart and his caring for me. And we have always been just friends and really connected friends. Okay? So I bring that up because we must stay connected to that little spark of self-hope, of knowing that we have it in us to achieve, obtain, acquire the dreams we have set in front of us for ourselves, yes?
Yes.
And for our life. And so I'm reminding you of that, and those people are the ones who continue to seek and ask and are coachable and trainable and are willing to not know and are willing to not get it and are willing to fail first to succeed. And that is you. That is me. And I had to get in touch with that. Again, this is the how. I never gave up, but I was never focused on money. I was fighting for my life. But what's interesting about the human brain and the fear mechanism is that our brain is fighting for its life, even when it comes to the dreams that we want in our life, not even when we're being chased or our life is threatened and we might be killed or murdered. Okay? So it's interesting. I was physically fighting for my life, consciously fighting for my life, subconsciously fighting for my life, unconsciously fighting for my life. But you know, when you go skydiving for fun, your brain is fighting for its life. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what's the difference? So when we...
perception, maybe?
Well, there is no difference. That's the point. Very good. You tried to see, but there is no difference. Our fear mechanism doesn't know the difference between the fear of being killed or murdered and the fear of skydiving for the first time. Do you understand that?
Got it.
That's what's very interesting. Until the conscious mind comes in and goes, oh no, the chances of you dying in any skydiving, adventure is slim to none. If you check the statistics, you'll come to find that the majority of any death or the deaths in skydiving are actually, guess what? The professionals. They have the highest mortality rate in skydiving. not newbies and first-time skydivers. And why is that? Because the master and the expert gets lazy and comfortable. They don't do all the checks. They try to get more daring. They're more attached to identifying themselves through their tricks and their skydiving, and they do something stupid. They get too close to the plane. They try a trick that's too close to the wing or the propeller or whatever. Okay? And that's what does it. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, very.
So then so the conscious mind has to go in and say, oh, wait a minute. It's safer to go skydiving than it is to drive my car down the freeway. Yes, so true. And then, okay, you want to do this. This company has had 0 fatalities. And on and on and on. And then you have to weigh your passion versus your fear. You know, it's scary as crap, but it's the most thrilling, exhilarating, passionate thing anyone can do because I've done it. Yay! And so then I say, okay, the passion far outweighs the fear, although I had very little fear. And so we do it. But that's what we have to do. We have to then measure the passion versus the fear. And that's also how we keep going. So back to the money. So I was down to almost losing everything in my search. So the smartest thing I did was I stayed in coaching. I stayed in because I've always had therapy throughout my lifetime. I was in and out of therapy and had different mentors. That's the number one, how you do it. We can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. Because if we try to do it alone, we're only with our self, and most importantly, we're with our lower self. And today there's many, many free resources or virtually free resources and books galore. Nobody has an excuse not to keep learning and growing and delving into self. That is one of the biggest, worst excuses any one human being can have in a first world and the United States, okay? So the how is staying with it. Now, the other how was because I never focused on the money. I did have a little benefit, but most human beings can train for this, is training not to be attached to the money part. So it was understanding one of the first things, well, I came in fairly fortunate in that because I did come from money and money was never a thing, but I had a lot of negative ties to money, negative associations to money. But what helped me was going, no, don't worry about the money. Stay connected to seeking and understanding yourself. Keep going and stand for you, for me. That's what I did. And here's the thing. I stood in killing myself. That I knew was a done deal. I stood for that. And I was going to make sure it happened. And with that energy, I stood for something, didn't I, Kris? Yeah. Standing for something, good, bad, or otherwise, is standing for something. It doesn't matter what I'm standing for. But that vibration is powerful. Very powerful. Even in marketing. And I've paid thousands of dollars to really good coaches and mentors to learn about marketing. And the thing in marketing, which I didn't know, was negative is just as good as positive marketing. If not a little better. As we can see. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, like the Kardashians or something.
Bingo. Exactly. Okay? And I just read about Lady Gaga and her doing something. She collaborated with R. Kelly and it was a disaster. But it drew it, when she apologized for it, her sales went up. Now, I'm not saying that's not for me. And I'm not going to judge or criticize other people. But what I know is it works. I personally am not a big fan of the negative marketing. Although it is very effective and I've used it in pseudo ways but not blatant negativity. And I'm a very positive, optimistic person, so that's really my jam. So I tend to go that way. But who am I to judge? As a matter of fact, I envy and respect people who can do the negative thing. And they're not doing it on purpose. Here's what we love about that. They're standing for what they believe. They're standing for their principles. They're standing for their heart and their soul and what is fulfilling to them. I did a podcast with a cartoonist. He did satire. He was one of the most hated satirical cartoonists. He said he got, every time he published his comic, he would get a like multiple page manifesto on how bad he is and how much of a failure he is. Isn't that interesting? And yet he made an enormous living at this and is one of the best of the best. Okay? And I said, are you kidding me? And at the same time, I knew the person that kept sending the negative letters over and over and emails to him and everything that they, were saying negatively about him and his cartoons and comics was really him expressing who he really is and who he really and what he hated about himself. And I did mention that to this particular cartoonist, and he kind of went, that's interesting. However, doesn't matter. It worked. And they say, my God, negative publicity is better than no publicity. They also say bad credit is better than no credit. You've heard that before, yes?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so where was I? I mean, this is so exciting. What? Go ahead. Sorry.
It was continue standing for himself.
Yeah, in the negativity.
Even in the negative light. Mm-hmm. I think that's powerful because for me, I'm by nature like a people pleaser. That's kind of how I grew up. Mm-hmm. So, hearing someone say they don't like what I'm doing, I would naturally say, well, what don't you like about it? And I'll take a look. But for him to say like, hey, I don't care if you don't like it, that this is me being expressive. I think there's a lot of power in that.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so this is how. So all along I'm going and I'm standing one way or the other. Do not walk the fence line, people. Pick a side. And it doesn't matter what side, because the same energy comes out. That vibrational energy is sent out to the universe, I believe, is standing for yourself. And that is a very high frequency. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. And then I was standing so greatly in death and suicide that my friend picked up on it. And he was the only one. Nobody else said anything. But it just takes one. It just takes one. And he was the one. Okay? Because I was standing for something. And I know in my heart of hearts that vibration was what did it. Okay? Now, let's cut to the money part. So I remember in my training, since he paid for that, then that's how I was able to do it. So in essence, I got a sponsor. He offered, I magnetized it. Now here's the thing, I wanted to keep learning and I wanted to keep doing the seminars and stuff. And I thought to myself, okay, now I'm going to be courageous and do something opposite of who I am and what I usually do. And what I did was I humbled myself and I called him up and I said, I want to do the next course. Will you pay for it? And he said, I was scared. And he said, and I can pay you back. He goes, I'll get you the money tomorrow.
Wow.
I will get you the money. Don't worry about paying me back. I will call them and pay for it and put it on my card. Okay? And that's how I got into the next course. Okay? Now, all along, I kept training. I kept focused on my heart and my soul and my passion. And it was working because I was starting to understand myself more so than I ever had before. Now, I'm going to say every book that I read, every therapist that I had, every counselor, every mentor, everything I've ever attended, live events, was starting now to come back to me in a good way. All of a sudden, cha-ching, cha-ching, everything that I had learned had started to help me connect more dots faster. And it had to happen over time. This is not overnight, people, and it never is. And if you think it's going to be, you're sadly mistaken. And you know what? At that point, there's very little help. I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to tell you the truth. I can't help those people. I tried. Number one person was my sister. Well, I failed miserably. But it wasn't up to me to help her. It was up to me to put out in my best, highest, purest way my truth, that wasn't offensive, which I couldn't do at that time because I didn't have the training, right? But I learned from that she made her choice. And she is dead and she's crossed over and she's in a better place for it, but that was all her. Had nothing to do with me. Nothing. And I learned from it, and it wasn't up to me to save her life or help her. It was to help myself first and teach by example. So since I didn't have that at the time, it clearly didn't work. I couldn't teach her anything powerful like I can now by example. But again, it was disassociating from the need to help people who, by the way, didn't want to be helped. She wanted nothing to do with anything that I had to say about getting help, dealing with the issues that are deeper. She didn't want to hear it. So there's nothing I can do about that. So we can only help those who are asking to be helped. That's what I have now. And that is so true. I see over and over and over again. And those people continue to seek. And it's okay even if you're afraid to ask for help. I do believe you stay and stand in that, and somewhere, somehow, some way, you'll magnetize something. And it's when we least expect it, it shows up. Okay? So I do remember, it had to go dark, Kris. It had to get worse before it got better. Okay? So I actually, in year one of my fighting for my life and recovery and healing, my taxes, I made $8,000. Supporting a ranch, horses. $8,000 was on my tax form.
Wow.
Huh? Now here's what's interesting. And I had a tax attorney, one of the best in the country. So I have a witness in a court of law. Year two, it was $6,000. It went down. See, that's what most people aren't willing to do. Get worse before it gets better. Uh-huh.
Right.
Now, in that time, you're saying, how could I support a ranch and horses and da-da-da-da-da? Well, I did everything I could. I borrowed money. I took out every loan under the sun. I cashed in all my stocks. I did whatever I had to do with my gifts and talents to make the money. I also learned about free resources and low-income resources. That's what I did. And I actually had to borrow a lot of money, be loaned a lot of money. I did whatever it took because I knew that if I didn't, it's not going to go well. And I went to people who knew me, who knew what I was capable of, who trusted me and had seen me at my best. That's the people who supported me. And as a matter of fact, I did have people support me that I just met, but in the same circles of consciousness and transformation and self-evolution. I had people gift me money and give me money. It was a few dollars here, a few dollars there. And I was willing to receive it. Did you hear that, Kris? I was willing to receive it. Graciously.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm. And I had no shame, no humiliation. I took it. Because I'm not stupid. Now, the old me would have had too much ego, super ego, pride, and said no, and shame. That is it. Shame and humiliation. I can't let people see me as a failure, as hopeless, as depressed, as suicidal, as dark, as a loser. That was really it. I can't have people see me as a loser. Well, guess what? I finally, in this learning about myself and transformation and consciousness, I learned that my perception of me being a loser was all in my mind, and I realized I was delusional about that, and that it was merely based on a perception of myself that I had. By understanding that there's no way to be, a human being can never be a loser or a failure. It's totally subjective. And so I reframed that and said, oh my God, I think I'm a loser because I have certain standards I'm trying to judge myself by, which are ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And then I reframe my perceptions to go, oh my God, not only am I not a loser, I'm the biggest winner for sharing my story and for helping other people see themselves through me, and for me to be unstoppable and want to heal myself to be better. Because again, I knew there was something more purposeful and meaningful for me to be here in my life. That there was divine intervention and something miraculous and spiritual about one person saying one thing and I didn't pull the trigger. And that's deep. So I had to look at my objective reality. Do you see this, Kris?
I do, yeah.
Uh-huh. And so it got worse before it got better. So I was willing to lose everything for my spirit, my soul, and myself and my inner child. And do you think that's a great investment?
The best one you can make.
Thank you.
And I think, like, just to kind of sum it up, so from my understanding, it seems like you kind of started off with, kind of having that relentless pursuit. Then you started believing in yourself and standing for something.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you kind of developed that, you knew that, you're going to do whatever it took to create what you want to create. And whether that, and for me, the hardest thing is removing that ego, that shame, the embarrassment, and the feeling of a loser, right? So when you stand for something, like your life's mission or goal or whatever it is, then all of that, it seems, falls to the wayside because it's not as important, right? That's like the passion outweighing the fear in this instance.
Yeah. So there was a time I remember in year 2, I had negative $74.82 in my bank. I owed everyone and everything in town. Credit cards. I was willing to go deep. Now the irony is, I have to say it, before my sister died and I got the phone call at 4 a.m, I remember clear as day, my life was really together, superficially. Okay? And the worst problem I had, and I remember saying this to myself, was how do I get my FICO score that dipped from 782 down to 760 because I bought a condo? How do I get it to 800? 800. That was my biggest superficial concern. And then all crap broke loose after I got that phone call. And I had been fighting for her life for years. So that was it for me, right? And so that's the irony. So I had to remove my attachment to my FICO score defining me, which is really my money defining me, and my career, and my job title, and how people see me defining me. Crap. I had to be willing to let it all go. I had to be willing to be humble, and to humble myself, and let go of my ego, and to be vulnerable, and to let people see me for who I really am, and who I really am not, and who I was, and who I was not. And that's how I did it. And I remember having no money in the bank, but I didn't care, because the epiphany came when I realized, oh my God, I've had lots of money in the bank, I've had lots of assets, I've had lots of success monetarily, but I was never happy. I never had the answers to all my deep, profound questions. I never had a purpose and a connection to the meaning of my life. And so I was willing to go dark and even darker before the dawn and the light, because I had to look back and go, oh my gosh, the way I had been living, the way I had been doing it, the way I had been being, my attitude, my character never worked with lots of money and assets. And that's what did it. It woke me up. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, to have negative $78 or 72, wait, what did I say? 74 and 82 cents in the bank, but to be happy because I knew the happiness lied in me reframing my perceptions and me really developing and falling in love with me and my inner child, developing my self-love and self-respect and self-identity on my terms. Then all of a sudden, the energy shifted. I felt the best feeling of fulfillment and peace that I'd ever had in my entire life. And by the way, at that time, my biggest fear was to die unhappy and unfulfilled and have my life mean nothing. And the worst part is, at some level, because I came from wealth, not only would I have died unhappy, I would have died rich and unhappy. That's even worse because I have no excuses. That was my biggest fear, to die rich and unhappy and unfulfilled and have no purpose or meaning in my life and my existence meaning nothing. And at that moment, and it was through the training and never giving up and keep seeking and keep practicing and keep training and practicing and training and practicing and failing, it finally hit me. And I was talking on the phone to a friend from my community, and all of a sudden, bing, the light went on, and I said, oh my God, I would rather be dead than live the life I had been living. And that did it. My energy shifted. All of a sudden, the spark of sparks hit, ignited the flame, and that flame never went out. And here I am today. Through more failing, more pain, more anguish, over and over again. But if I can make it through that, I can make it through anything. That's what I got. That's why I was happy to have no money. And people, see, it was also training to understand that I thought money was freedom. I thought money were two things that I had to really dig deep for. Number one, money equals betrayal and unhappiness and unfulfillment. I learned that from my family and my own perceptions as a child because I'm a very, very, very old soul. And I've been here many, 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 many lifetimes because I believe in reincarnation, all of that, okay? I believe that money's severe unhappiness and emptiness and darkness. And on the flip side, consciously, money was freedom. But unfortunately, unconsciously wins the race. The unconscious mind wins the race. Okay? So thinking money is freedom, well, I've made a lot of money. My net worth went into the multi-millions when I was in real estate. But how come I still wasn't happy? And I had to look backwards to connect those dots to see the reality of it. Does that make sense, Kris?
Yes.
So then I can connect the dots and realize, oh my God, I'm lying to myself and everyone and everything else. I am lying to think that money is my freedom and my happiness. And how could it even be that when I'm really underneath it all, subconsciously and unconsciously thinking money is severe pain and darkness and unhappiness? See, I talked a big game consciously, but I was full of crap on a cracker unconsciously. So I had this really poor relationship with and to money. And so that's the thing, is understanding people put so much meaning into money and significance into money and what money can do and not do for us. And it's a lie. And that's how I did it. Was never focusing on the money, focusing on my life, my heart, my passion, my desire, and the hope, and focusing on, again, I'll say it, that conscious, subconscious, and unconscious connection to my genius, to my truth, whatever you want to call your genius, okay? Your truth, your highest, best self, your highest self, whatever you want to call it, your intuition. At some level, I stayed connected to that intuitive side of me, that spiritual side of me. And then learning that it's never ever about the money. I didn't learn it that way. That's what I teach now. It's never ever about the money. And it wasn't. Because if at that moment, I tell you, I realized with negative $74 in the bank, okay? But I realized for the first time, reframing my perceptions and understanding everything that I've been through and why I felt the most overwhelming sense of happiness, fulfillment, and peace that I've ever felt my entire life. And if the little tiny blue-green marble blew up and we're all gone, I was happy. And you can't put a price on that now, can you?
No.
Mm-mm.
And I think I just did a really super awesome connection.
Okay, what was it? What is it?
So, consciously we lie to ourselves. And when it comes to money specifically, right, we're saying like, oh yeah, money equals freedom, money equals this, money equals that. But unconsciously we have so many ties to money that that we don't see and most people don't ever acknowledge.
Yep.
And so what I see is, or what I'm hearing, and this is kind of like what clicked, was through the work that we do, connecting to the unconscious, subconscious mind, and really connecting to that genius at the same time is also reframing all of those perceptions that you have of money and understanding it, tapping into it, and retraining. And that's what allows you to align the conscious mind with the subconscious and unconscious.
Yes.
And that's what kind of frees up that attachment to money.
Yes. The attachment, the defining self in life, yourself and your life by money has got to go. That energy charge has got to go. And that's predominantly how I did it, because I focus. It's not, I want to say I didn't really care about the money. I did care about the money. That's a lie. But I didn't focus on it, and I kept my eyes on the prize, the passion, and on me and my heart and my soul and my spirit and my hope. That's how I did it over and over again. And I realized the objectivity of money. Money is just a tangible tool, an objective object or tool used in exchange for goods and services. I had to really, really take that in and experience more loss in money to really ingrain that so powerfully into my mind, to have it become subconscious. Yes. And understand that it is not freedom and it's not unhappiness either. Ta-da! Lie. Money doesn't equal happiness, and it doesn't equal unhappiness. It also doesn't equal freedom, and it doesn't equal imprisonment. Money is just fabric paper with ink on it, and we can use it for toilet paper, or we could use it in exchange for a good or service. Yes?
Yes.
That's also how I did it over and over and over again. And I realized every time I thought money was going to save me or help me or get me out of a situation, I was really seeing that I was trying to use money to pretend I'm not a failure or a loser. And really getting the ability to unconsciously not have that happen is what really set me free. Now, by the way, I will tell you, in all that time that I was studying, and that's all I did. I slept, ate, drank, transformation, consciousness, delving into self. That's all I did. I did nothing else. Then all of a sudden the clarity would come. I reframed my perceptions. I thought of ways to make money. I'm like, Karen, you have horses, teach horseback riding lessons. Bingo, money. All of a sudden things started to happen. And yes, all along the way, I magnetized so many different ways to make money here and there. And I was willing to humble myself and do what I had to do that was legal, moral, and ethical to myself and my heart. I won't judge anybody else, but there's certain things I would not do. Like prostitution, not my jam. And that's a whole nother thing, right? Not my jam. But I knew I had gifts and talents that I could use and be resourceful and start charging even just a little bit of money. It doesn't matter. People get caught up also, and I'm guilty of this, of having then the ego tied to the amount of money. No, got to let that go. That's still attachment. And all of a sudden, I found ways to make money. Now, I was even willing, this is the biggest thing, I was a waitress. And I think every human being on the planet should be a waiter or waitress as growth. Now, I hated being a waitress, and I want to tell you, I failed miserably to the point where I did not get tips on several occasions because of my attitude and my beingness. I hated it, and I didn't lie about it. You could tell. I didn't say anything, but you can tell when I came to your table, I was miserable. But I did it, and I was really proud of that. Now, it didn't work out, okay, but again, I get to live with I did it. So in this process, I wanted to leave real estate, and people said, no, stay with real estate. No, it's over. We're breaking up, and there's no turning back. I've outgrown it, and I got to move on. But I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was willing. Are you ready? The moment I had the breakthrough, I was willing to be a waitress at that time. Even with my California real estate license, because the passion had died, I was willing to try something new and go back to the fundamentals, knowing it would help me in some way, shape, or form to evolve myself to even a higher, more profound, powerful level. And so I opened up my mind, humbled myself, and said, I'm willing to work at Starbucks or McDonald's. As a matter of fact, I was like, I love McDonald's coffee. They have some of the best. It's not organic, but they've done taste tests. Anyway, I said, I'll work at McDonald's. Me, work at McDonald's. And it was not just the willingness to do it. It was me being open and humble enough to do whatever it took for myself in my life. But then it's counterintuitive. I never had to work at McDonald's, but I would have, or Starbucks. Hate Starbucks coffee. Sorry. It tastes yucky to me. But I was willing to do it. And then my willingness and letting go of that sense of entitlement and my ego that I'm better than that, it opened up even another whole deal. And I was willing to work for somebody else. And I had been an entrepreneur and worked for myself most of my career. And I was willing to work for someone else. I was willing to do what it took to get where I wanted to be. I even applied for a job. I don't even know if you know this. I had a friend, Gulfstream jet pilot. He, several years, I think like 1 year prior, or 2 years, he said, you'd be a great flight attendant for the Gulfstream jet. I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? No way. That's just a glorified waitress. And when he offered me that, I was so offended. But then after opening myself up and growing and enlightening myself with grand wisdom, I called him up and said, I want to apply for a job as a flight attendant on the Gulfstream. What can you do for me? I went and asked him. And I actually got a job interview with my application and no experience. I did get an interview for one of the top Gulfstream companies. Now, I failed in that because I had no experience, and I failed the interview, and I was a little down about that, but then I reframed it and said, no, Karen, you've never had any experience, and you failed as a waitress, and you still went and applied. You had such a great application, and I did. I had, but if I really looked, I was willing to do it. But truth be told, it is not my greatest gift and talent to serve food, prep food. I don't even like to eat food. So it wasn't really a match. Yeah, that's funny, right? I'm not a big fan of food. Okay? So it was really not the best match for me. And who cares? I got to go on my friend's Gulfstream jet that he was a pilot for. I got to interview and I got to train for the unknown. I got to train for something that would help me today be even better at what I do love, which is true because I have that story now, Kris, to share with people. Yes?
Right. Yeah.
Then it opened up the next thing. So let's cut to the chase. Boom. You're not going to believe this, people, but it's so true. This is why I teach and preach and practice magnetism in continuing to do my thing, be who I was, focus on me, the best me, the purest, truest me, and stay with my philanthropic passions. And I never set out to do what I do today, but in following my heart and bliss, I was actually asked if I do personal coaching. I magnetized my very first client who came to me out of the blue when I least expected it, not even in the context of coaching or networking. I was speaking about my nonprofit organization at the time in my philanthropic endeavors. And I had this amazing, beautiful woman come up to me and go, oh, I love what I just heard. I got a standing ovation in that, by the way, when I talked about the nonprofit work I was doing with my own nonprofit that I started. We talked, we had a phone call, and she says, by the way, do you do personal coaching?
From the waitress to kind of doing whatever it takes to applying to those jobs to having that woman ask you if you did any coaching, what's the time frame on that?
I don't remember.
Perspective.
And I would have to say it was many, well, you know, when it clicked over, it wasn't that long, Kris. I do remember it took me 2 years. Okay? When I started, the business started February 2011, right? Suicide attempt is December 2008. My first seminar was 2009, February 20th. And then I started my coaching business. I didn't start it. It started me. Was February 2011, right? The tail end, in the height of a recession, recovering. Yes?
Yeah.
And she came to me. So it did. It took 2 years. But I was relentless. It wasn't just, it would take people maybe 5 years, 7 years. But that's all I did. I was willing to do whatever it takes. I was so hungry and foolish for it that I did whatever I could to stay in learning about myself. I was willing to do that. And that's how we do it. You have to be willing to let go of everything. I was willing to let go of my rant. I was willing to let go of my materialism. I don't want to, but I was willing to, if that's what it took. Do you understand that?
I do, yeah.
And that's, seriously, ask any Olympic athlete, right? You got to be willing to go super dark at all costs. At all costs. That's what I believe. Without being attached to it. And that's what did it. This is the how all through this podcast. Let's wrap it up because I know you've got to go. So we can say 2 years, and then she asked me if I did personal coaching. I hesitated because I wasn't a formal coach, but I had been a personal trainer. So what's the difference? And I thought to myself, see, there's where I could look at objective reality. And I was a personal dance teacher and fitness trainer. That was the business before real estate. And boom, I paused and then I said, why, yes, I do. And there it goes. And that's what started me as a coach and trainer, mentor, whatever you want to call me. And now I'm developing my spiritual intuitive business and that side, adding that onto my repertoire, if you will. But she came to me, she asked me, I never said I'm going to be a coach and I'm looking for clients and I'm going to go network and no. Again, I stood for something. I stood for myself. I stood for what I knew to be my truth. I don't care if anyone else, it was their truth. I stood for my truth. And that's what did it. We're back. We come full circle, Kris. You see this? I stood for me.
Yeah.
And then she picked up that energy. And so then she said yes. And she was with me for like 2 years. And then it just escalated from there, Kris. Do you understand? I kept doing the same thing, rinse and repeat. Kept growing myself, kept growing my business, growing myself, growing my business to what it is today. Okay? And so does that answer your question as to how I was able to do it and who I was able to be? Yes?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm sorry we went a little longer, but you brought up such a genius question that had several different sub-questions. So let's wrap it up. What is the biggest thing you heard for yourself here?
Well, I heard several things. Mm-hmm. One of the main things that clicked over for me was magnetizing support, mm-hmm. and not really caring where the money comes from, because that's something I really struggle with. Mm-hmm. The willingness to continue to be of service all the time to other people, even if you have nothing. Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty amazing, mm-hmm. to tap into, because at some level people can see that. They're like, wow, he has nothing, she has nothing, but yet she still is out here relentlessly giving it her all or his all. Right? Mm-hmm. I think that's very powerful. But also standing for something, I think that's huge. And it seems as if when you stand for something, that's when that passion overtakes the fear, because you're so focused on the passion that you don't stand for anything. You stand for what you know and what you believe in. So mm-hmm. Developing that, I think that was also kind of a great point. Doing whatever it takes. Mm-hmm. $4 in your bank account, owing everybody.
Yep.
hey, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was very powerful. And also in that same token, being willing to do whatever it takes also means letting go of that ego, shame, embarrassment, people's perception. And I think through the coaching and training, that's when you, at least for me, I've learned to really reframe my perceptions, and I still struggle with it. I'm not perfect at it,
Mm-hmm.
But still, understanding that idea is very powerful. And then one of the main things that I took away, I would say like probably the biggest overarching theme, was the subconscious and conscious mind difference, like the cognitive dissonance, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you said the unconscious mind wins the race.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we have all those deep ingrained ties to things that we don't realize at the conscious level, because consciously we're able to see something, say something, and be like, yeah, that sounds good. But, in reality, like, what is your mind really thinking? Or what, And so really tapping into that unconscious, subconscious genius that we all have allows us to retrain and reframe those perceptions so that our conscious mind actually lines up with the unconscious mind. Mm-hmm. So there is no cognitive dissonance, or there's little cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. Brilliant. Uh-huh. So this is the how of the money, is not be attached to the money. Love money. I love money. Don't get me wrong. Love, love, love it. I've been told many times I'm a money magnet. Yes, I am. But, it goes in phases. It's never, ever, ever subconsciously, unconsciously about the money. And it is all about the money consciously. So again, that's what you're saying. We must align the unconscious, subconscious, and conscious mind to our relationship to and with money, and that'll do it. Yes? But that relationship is a byproduct of a relationship to self and to mother, father. Okay?
Wow. Yeah. Powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So that said, I want to thank you so much for being here and adding your incredible, phenomenal energy. Again, brilliant question.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm excited, and I am so happy to start to talk about this relationship with and to money specifically, because that is what's coming up on my new Smart app, and people will have the ability to really, look money in the face for all that it is and all that it is not. And I know that we have worked on you even talking about, saying the word money. And that's a lot of things. People don't even want to hear about the money. They don't want to discuss it. They don't want to talk about it. Oh, no, we're talking about it. And even me, I'm guilty. Guilty is charged. All along, I could have done this a long time ago. Right. As a matter of fact, they want to do a TV show when I was in real estate. They're like, I left real estate, but they're like, we can do your real estate stuff, as a negotiator, for my TV show. And I was like, no, wait, that doesn't resonate. So I could have done this whole money thing easily, in a way, but I wasn't ready myself because I still had some misalignments about money. And I didn't want people to think, oh, she's all about the money. Well, I'm going to tell you, I am all about the money, but on my terms, in my way. And it's never, ever about the money, but I'm going to have gobloads and gobloads of it, but just not be attached to it and not pretend or lie to myself that it can do anything for me in terms of happiness and fulfillment or power or prestige. Forget it. And that's why I'm teaching it, because I see the massive collective consciousness of cognitive dissonance in the realm of money. Would you agree, Kris?
Yes, I would.
Yeah. But it's going to be handled on my terms. And this is how I, have money in my life. I magnetize it. It comes to me. I'm a magnet for it, not just money, but for everything and everyone that I want in my life. That's how this goes. Money is a physical manifestation of that spiritual connection we have to and with self. And if it's not there, then there's a disconnect where there needs to be more work in the realm of developing relation to self first and foremost, because I'll tell you something, the money's not going to help you. Isn't that true?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, so that said, thank you all for listening. KarenLovely@gmail. And thank you. I'd love to hear comments. Look for my Smart app. The money program is coming. And I love you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Kris, you are by far one of the most genius, brilliant, extraordinary, miraculous human beings on the planet. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate it.